This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we've got a major update here in the Georgia State Election Board, which we've been following especially closely. A group of Democrats are now fighting back in court, and this was after the pro-Trump election deniers that are sitting on the State Election Board passed a rule mandating a hand count of all ballots in Georgia. So what happened here?
Yeah, these mega Republicans have really outdone themselves. I mean, they, got their shout out from Donald Trump from the stage, saying they're pit bulls and going to help him towards victory. And then they took it in a direction that we all kind of predicted, right? Which was that they passed some rules that tried to give election denier counting officials more discretion in counting ballots. But then they weren't done. And they came back and passed a bunch more rules. And clearly the craziest of them, and that's grading on a scale here.
Quite a steep curve there. Yeah, go on.
Quite a curve, right? The craziest of them is to require a hand count of every ballot, and that is shall we say, not contemplated by Georgia law. In fact, it is so not legal, to put it politely, that even the Republican Attorney General of the state, a name that we don't usually talk about. You oftentimes hear Brad Raffensperger's name come up as from 2020, but the Attorney General is actually quite a bit more conservative than even Brad Raffensperger, and he issued an opinion saying, before the rule was passed, by the way, saying this rule that you are contemplating is not legal, so you shouldn't pass it. And yet they did anyway. And so, look, the Attorney General was right. It's not often that the conservative Attorney General and I agree on these things. It's not legal, and this rule is not going to survive.
Okay, so I do want to get to the Georgia officials in a moment, these statewide elected officials in a moment. But first, in terms of the lawsuit that Democrats are bringing forward, do you have any indication as to whether these Democrats will be successful?
Yeah, like I said, I think that at the point that Democrats are suing and the conservative Attorney General of the state agrees that it's illegal, that's a pretty good sign of the strength of any litigation.
Okay, so if you have the Georgia governor, the Georgia Attorney General, the Georgia Secretary of State, by the way, all Republicans, all of whom say that this rule is not legal, then why don't they take aggressive action and use their own authority to shut it down instead of tiptoeing around this issue or just kicking the can over to the Democrats to bring litigation in court?
Look, you asked a really important question. It's something actually you and I have talked about before, which is that in the first instance, if the Attorney General thinks the law is not legal, if the Secretary of State thinks the law is not legal, how about they sue?
Right.
Right. I mean, we talked about this very same question with respect to the prior rule about the election deniers having discretion to investigate, where they also made noises that say, well, this is not good. This is not consistent with the law. And I was like, okay, well, then how about they sue? And they didn't. And the Democrats eventually had to sue. So it's a legitimate question as to why it is that the conservative Republicans in the state don't do this, or that the governor doesn't simply replace, he has the power to replace these election board members, why he hasn't fired them for misconduct or for transgressing state law. So there are a lot of things that Republicans could do. Brian, if you and I spent every day doing a video about the things that responsible Republicans should do and could do, we would have a whole new series of videos. We could invite Glenn, we could invite Tim, we could do like literally an endless series of videos about what responsible Republicans will do. What I can say is that, unfortunately, it is left to Democrats and progressive organizations and people committed to democracy oftentimes to stand up and do the things that have to be done to protect voting rights in court. But that's just where we are.
Just as a quick aside, I know that you've been following exceedingly closely on the Georgia State Election Board with Democracy Docket. So for those watching right now, if you want to stay up to date on all of this stuff, including any changes on a daily basis, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. That's how I've been getting all of my news on this topic as well. Mark, what would it look like, for example, if Georgia truly did have to hand count ballots? Like, how long would it take? And what would the accuracy of a hand recount look like?
Yeah, so look, in Georgia, what you need to understand is that anyone who votes in person in Georgia votes on a machine that creates a physical mark of the vote. And those marks are are perfect. They are literally, they are created. They're like lasered or laser jetted or I don't know what, but they are perfectly filled out ballots. So a hand recount is not going to be more accurate than a machine recount in that circumstance. Like you're just, you're not going to have a significant number of votes that are going to be deviations. You may have a little bit of change in the numbers, but it's not going to be material, and it's not going to be more accurate. What you're really introducing into it is three things. Number one, you are introducing some level of error that can take place, right? The more times you handle ballots, the more likely you are to lose them, the more likely they are to become bent or otherwise, things get spilled, right? So that's number one. Number two, as you point out, you put delay into the process, right? It just takes a lot longer to hand recount ballots, and that is a significant issue. But the third that I want to say directly to the people of Georgia is it's a lot more expensive. It consumes staff time. It consumes physical space. When we do recounts, because they are very close elections, counties bear a significant burden of cost and personnel and physical space in order to get those done. And for a election board that does not have the statutory authority to do this, to not just risk more error, not just transgress state law, not just take up more time, but frankly, to cost the taxpayers all kinds of money in overtime pay. Because remember, this is also taking place leading up in a compressed time frame, leading up to the holidays. So, this is a very, very significant burden that they are putting on these counties. And if I were a taxpayer in Georgia, I would be pretty upset about this, whether I was a Democrat or a Republican.
All, by the way, I should add, for a recount where if the Democrat wins, they're still not going to accept the results anyway. That's the ultimate irony of all of this, is that all of these extra steps are being set up, all of these hoops are being set up that we have to jump through, and then at the end of the day, if Democrats dare win an election there, all of these people who instituted these rules are going to find any other reason to still deny its validity. That's right. That's the tragic irony of all of this.
That's right. And it's in a state, just to be clear, that, in 2020, where the margin was already 11,000 votes, right? It wasn't super close. There was a full statewide hand recount, followed by a full statewide machine recount.
Right.
So it's not even like these counting would then prevent the second and third recounts. So literally the state of Georgia is just going to keep counting and recounting over and over again their ballots, even though no results are going to substantially change.
Right. What is it they say about the definition of insanity? Marc, I want to turn your attention to a clip here.
For the past 2.5 years, we have heard complaints from citizens about frustrations in making 229 and 230 challenges, and the board has been asked repeatedly to provide guidance regarding these challenges. In the meantime, Marc Elias, described as an American Democratic Party elections lawyer and founder of Democracy Docket, former Hillary Clinton lawyer, former Perkins Coie partner, and current Elias Law Group partner, sent letters to many, if not all, election offices in Georgia, threatening legal action if they upheld challenges. This appears to have interfered with the duty of the registrars to hear challenges and review the qualifications of voters on the county voter list. In fact, if one considers preparation of a qualified electors list a part of the election conduct, which it is, Mr. Elias is interfering with our elections. Failure to comply with the provisions in Code 230 section by the Board of Registrars shall subject such board to sanctions by the state election board.
Okay, so this is Janice Johnston, one of the 3 Trump-aligned election deniers on the Georgia State Election Board, attacking you personally by name. What was your reaction to this clip when you saw it?
I thought, wow, she really knows my bio. I mean, she ran through like a whole litany with me.
I'm not even kidding. There was a brief moment where I thought she might even mention Democracy Watch on YouTube.
Right, yeah, she mentioned Democracy Docket. I thought she might mention Democracy Watch. I mean, she had a pretty good, run there of the things I've done, including how I have told counties in the past that if they violate federal law, they are likely to be sued for violating federal law. I'm glad she pointed that out because, in fact, it is true. If counties in Georgia or counties anywhere violate federal law, they should expect to be sued for violating federal law. If they violate state law, they should expect to be sued for violating state law. And shame on the State Board of Elections for encouraging these counties to be potentially violating those laws. So look, I thought it was interesting that Donald Trump knew the names of three board members of this obscure board. And I found it interesting that one of the obscure members of that obscure board knew me in my bio. Yeah. And I guess in that sense, I should be flattered.
And let's finish off with this. Is this whole process, this whole saga, is this actually about the accuracy of ballots, or is this more about just creating chaos and delay by virtue of some, effort to recount 5 million votes that Republicans can then fill with disinformation in the same exact way that Trump literally asked his own DOJ in 2020 to just announce that there was fraud and then, quote, leave it up to Trump and Republican congressmen to take it from there?
Here's the deal. If you live in a state in 2024 that votes for Donald Trump and he wins, he will announce you had free and fair elections. If you live in a state in 2024 that votes and Kamala Harris wins, he will announce that there was widespread fraud. And I mean that categorically. I'm not limiting this to Georgia. I'm not limiting this to swing states. I'm including in this New York, California, Connecticut, yeah. Rhode Island, Oregon, pick your blue state. He is going to say that he won all 50 states. He may even say he won the District of Columbia, a place that he constantly disparages. But he is never going to acknowledge that he is unpopular. He's never going to acknowledge that he lost an election anywhere. And so all of these efforts to change rules, to add steps, to create more confusion, to try to suggest through innuendo that there is irregularity, it is all just in furtherance of an excuse grievance structure that Donald Trump wants to complain at the end about why he lost. It will never be in vogue or invoked if he wins. So yeah. It's not about the Constitution. It's not about the law. It's not about the voters. It's about this very small, demented man's ego.
Perfectly put. Again, for those watching right now, to support the invaluable work that Marc and his team are doing in the courts, which is ground zero for all of this attacks on democracy by Republicans right now, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.